Hey, it's Jeff from the Two Geeks and a Get podcast. Did you know we have a Patreon page? We do. There's over 35 hours of bonus material there. Things like top 5 lists and pre-shows. There's even a blooper reel. So if you're not taking advantage of all of this extra material by becoming a Patreon subscriber, do you not like being entertained? Just go to our website at www.twogeeksandaget.com, click on the blue banner, become a Patreon supporter today, and get access to all those extra goodies. Thanks, and now, on with the review. Hello and welcome to the Two Geeks and a Get podcast, classic movie reviews for the 21st century. That's right, it's our job to help you find your next favorite movie today, like this second, because if this isn't one of them, it maybe should be. I know it's one of mine, but I am, as people who've listened to the podcast before will know, a horror fanatic. So this movie strikes a lot of different chords with me because it's about the film industry. It's about sort of urban myth that sprang from an early film production, and then somebody took that urban myth and turned it into a screenplay. And this is the result. This is our second film in our Willem Dafoe pairing. We're focusing on him because he's an amazing character actor.
He's great. And this is probably one of his very best performances.
Yep. The last episode we did, the first one in our pairing, we looked at 1999's The Boondock Saints. But for this one, we're going to a radically different movie and a radically different performance for Willem Dafoe. We're going a year later to the year 2000 and a movie based on an urban legend springing from the production of Nosferatu back in the very early 1920s.
Yes.
Called Shadow of the Vampire.
Yes, and this is a movie that we've reviewed on this very podcast. You'll need to go back a ways to hear it, but go back and listen to our review of Nosferatu, and might help set this this film up for you.
Actually, yeah, it's a good idea. If you want to watch this movie and you haven't seen the original 1922 F.W. Murnau Nosferatu, go back and watch that first.
By the way, it's one of the best vampire movies ever made.
Yeah, it's so creepy.
Yeah, it's worth watching by itself.
Yep. So watch that, then watch this.
Yeah.
And we'll get into sort of the urban myth that sprung up from the production and how this all kind of evolved as we go along. But before we go any further, we should definitely introduce ourselves. I'm Jeff, and I will eat her later. And I'm a geek.
I'm Buddy. If I'm not on the frame, I don't exist. And I, too, am a geek.
I'm Chad. If you watch a guy catch a bat and eat it, he's a vampire.
Yeah,
Or,
pretty much.
Or he's Ozzy Osbourne.
Well, except Ozzy didn't know it was real.
It was an accident, yeah.
He would have stopped.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he
Definitely.
did. But, so as I said, this movie came out in the year 2000, directed by an interesting gentleman. We looked at his filmography, and he's pretty much only got one other feature-length film.
Yeah.
The rest is all shorts and videos. It's a gentleman named E. Elias Merrish.
Yeah, it was a director I'm not familiar with other than this movie.
No, he did this one, and he did a movie called Suspect Zero in 2004.
I have not seen that.
No, and that's pretty much it. But he knocked it out of the park with this one.
I think this is a really good. I think if you didn't have a good director that could handle the subject matter well, you would have had a really tough time with this movie, and he really does very well.
Yep. The screenplay was written by Stephen Katz and stars John Malkovich and Willem Dafoe.
Yes.
And it is the story of the making of the film Nosferatu by the incredible director F.W. Murnau.
Now, Murnau, if you're not terribly familiar with him, Murnau was kind of the ultra flamboyant director of his day. He was I struggle to say that he was the Michael Bay of his day because his movies are good and Michael
He
Bay's
was
are
more
crap.
like I would maybe say he was the John Waters of his day.
Well, I don't think he had that kind of quirky humor
Oh, yeah,
that
that's
John
true.
Waters has, but he definitely had
Maybe
the
the
ego.
Tarantino?
Maybe, yeah. Tarantino's ego, I think, is coming up to this level at this
Yeah.
point, but he definitely had the flamboyant ego that Michael Bay currently has, and he really was saw himself as sort of the consummate ultimate artist,
Yep.
which you almost can't argue he kind of was.
Yeah, he was at the time.
At the time, I mean, this is the guy not only made Nosferatu probably the greatest vampire movie ever made. He also made great movies like Faust and Sunrise. Those are great movies. One of the first movies to ever win an Academy Award. Really good. Moody, fantastic visual movies. Of course, they were silent movies.
Yeah, so
made
they
in the
had to be
20s,
fantastic visuals
but
to be successful.
So fantastic vision and could work with actors in sort of very unique ways and things. But yeah, apparently was quite insufferable in a lot of ways, and I think Malkovich captures this so perfectly.
Yeah, John Malkovich, of course, plays Friedrich Wilhelm Monod, and Willem Dafoe plays Max Schreck,
and
who
talk
was
about
the-
a great performance.
the actor who was hired to play Dracula. Basically, they had to legally
Yes.
call him Count Orlok
Yes.
because they couldn't get the rights from Dracula or from Bram Stoker's widow.
Yes.
So they just, changed all the names and made the movie anyway. But what happened on the original shoot was that Max Schreck was a method actor.
Well, before that term didn't yet exist, but that's essentially he refused to be out of character.
Yeah. No one on the film shoot ever saw him out of full makeup and costume.
And he demanded to be called Count Orlok
Yes,
even when the
yes.
cameras were not rolling.
Yep.
And, it's what we would now consider a method actor, even though that term did not exist at
Right.
that time.
But because of that, there grew an urban legend at the time that the reason why his performance was so affecting was that Max Schreck actually was a vampire.
Yes, and to sort of feed into that, he really didn't make a whole lot of movies after this one.
Right.
And even though he had been a stage and even a screen actor before this, so he did make other movies that were not vampiric, but very
Yes.
few people saw them. This was really about the only movie people really saw Max Schreck ever in, so that sort of fed into the idea. Well, he couldn't make any other movies because he's really a vampire.
Right.
It's kind of fed into that.
Yeah, and I think that's what I enjoy again about this movie is books that I like to read are sort of these alternate history
Yes.
books, and that's kind of what this.
Oh, that's absolutely
this
what
movie
this is.
This is what if Max Schreck really was a vampire?
Yes.
And it makes it so interesting. And watching Willem Dafoe play Max Schreck in this film, and to see all of those things that maybe this really did happen or maybe it didn't happen, kind of a thing as you're watching this movie, is part of what I really found interesting about this film. Not only Dafoe's portrayal of Max Schreck, which was very, very good. I mean, just a wonderful portrayal in this film. But all the other things that like catching the bat and eating it and things like that were just so fun to watch.
Yeah, yeah. Well, before we get too much further into this story, why don't I give you a taste of what it sounds like? And you can hear a little bit of Dafoe as Max Schreck. We'll go ahead and roll the trailer.
Roll camera. Iris in. Begin.
It's been a fitful night, but you wake refreshed.
What is that beside you?
It's a book about vampires. Nosferatu.
Director F.W. Murnau had an obsession to create the world's most realistic vampire movie.
Meet Count Orlok.
The overture to our Symphony of Horrors.
He dug up an actor
I'd like some makeup.
Well, you don't get any.
who didn't just play the part,
But you're not feeding.
No, you're not drinking her blood.
he lived it.
What is the matter with you?
Where did you find him, really?
From Lionsgate Films and producer Nicolas Cage comes the haunting tale of the uncompromising,
You will have no close-ups now.
the unimaginable, and the undead. Academy Award nominees John Malkovich
I will finish my picture.
and Willem Dafoe.
This is hardly your picture any longer.
Shadow of the Vampire.
How dare you destroy my photographer?
Why not the script girl?
I'll eat her later.
And so there you can hear, you know who Willem Dafoe is.
Oh yeah.
And you know what Willem Dafoe sounds like. That's not what Willem Dafoe sounds like.
No.
The transformation in this film is nothing short of miraculous. I mean,
It is indeed. I listened to a interview with Willem Dafoe about his performance in this, and he says a lot of it not only between the costumes and but the makeup, which was a 3-hour deal
not
into.
surprised.
And a 3-hour deal out of.
well, yeah, because they had
every
to
day.
preserve it.
Yeah,
so they had to take it off very carefully so they could put it back on.
So every day he had a 6-hour journey that he had to go through to become this
Wow.
character and to sort of transform. But that really he says that really kind of helped him lose himself in that part by undergoing the makeup transformation. He could sort of undergo a sort of a personality transformation as well, and that really pulled me out of myself. He said, and it really helped me to sort of create these reactions and to create these characteristics that I never would have considered otherwise. He said. And it really helped pull him out of himself, which allowed him to sort of fill himself with this character. So that's kind of what he contributes his the fact that he basically vanishes. Willem Dafoe vanishes and sort of becomes Max Schreck in this movie. That a lot of it has to do with the makeup, which, by the way, the makeup was the other Oscar. Willem Dafoe was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this movie. The makeup was the other nomination that this movie got.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
It got nominated. Unfortunately, it won neither award. But
well, that's because the Oscars tend to not like horror films. The fact that it was nominated is notable,
which is amazing. And the makeup is really amazing in this movie. Not only, is it reminiscent of vampires, but you look at this guy, and if you are familiar with the original Nosferatu, Willem Dafoe really appears to be Max Schreck in that movie. Now, of course, part of that is his wonderful performance, the way he walks, the way he stands. The first time we see him is kind of a fuzzy picture. We don't really see, again, like any good movie monster, we don't fully see him till about almost 24 minutes into this movie.
Yep.
But we see glimpses of him, and there's sort of an out of focus. The first time we see him at all, there's sort of out of focus view of him, kind of from the chest down. You don't see his face even. You just see his hands and how he holds these hands with these enormous claws.
Those 2-inch, they're like 3-inch long nails.
Yeah, the way he holds those as he sort of approaches the camera in the exact same gait that Max Schreck had in the movie, you know instantly who he is, and even though you don't see him very well at all, they might as well have taken a clip from that movie and rear projected it onto a screen. It was that good, the performance. And then you really see that in this movie.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think it's a tiny little thing, but it really has an effect here is that when you watch Nosferatu, these were hand cranked cameras, so the speed is not completely constant, and it looks jerky to a 21st century film viewer sensibility. Willem Dafoe managed to figure out how to incorporate that into his physical performance without making it look schlocky or out of place.
Sure, just like an actor of that time would have had to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, say what you will about how he is a great actor, but this film really showcases that he is a great physical actor as well.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's one of the things that absolutely made him into this character was the physicality of the role.
Posture, the stance, the gait, the facial expressions, the arm and hand movements, the finger movements,
his eye movements, just the looking left and right, the way he holds his mouth in this movie.
Yes,
all was extremely reminiscent of Max Schreck in Nosferatu. And it's it's an amazing transformation. It's an amazing performance. I really think this is his very best performance.
The other person, of course, we have to talk about as far as carrying this movie is Malkovich.
Oh, yeah, John Malkovich is an incredible performer in virtually any movie he's in, but he's great in this.
And he absolutely embodies the idea that you have this Hollywood director who is flamboyant.
Well, he was a German director.
Sorry,
he was a German director. Yeah.
But he's flamboyant. He's a visionary. He's a little off kilter, and he is an egomaniac.
He's a genius artistically, but he knows it.
Yep.
And he has an ego to match this.
And he expects everyone. They call him Herr Doctor.
Yeah.
Do we know, did he actually have any sort of degree?
Actually, I think he might have. I'm not sure, but they certainly treat him that way. But I'm not 100% sure, but I think he might have.
I will look it up.
The German government, though, absolutely treated this guy that way. Of course, at the time, the film industry in Germany was paid for by the government, and of course they expected a certain level, but they also treated those who did well for them quite well. In addition, and of course Murnau was one of the most artistic, and well-known directors of the time. So he was treated very well, and you see that. I think in his personality here, and from what I understand, this is not too far from the way Murnau actually was.
Well,
in reality,
they say he wasn't as demanding of his actors. He was actually had a very he was very sensitive to most of his actors, but his sort of ego, again, I sort of buy into that as this guy who would be, he'd go, well, I'm going to make the best vampire movie ever.
Yes.
I'm actually going to get a vampire
yes.
to play the role because I have that big an ego.
Yes.
That I can somehow pull this off.
Yeah.
And make it work.
And he demands. I mean, they show that he demands realism. One of the producer of this movie, played by Udo Kier, again a really great actor who somehow seems to be always kind of gravitating toward the vampire movies. But that's good. I love him.
He's found a niche where he fits.
Absolutely. He plays the producer, Albin Grau, in this movie, who technically outranks the director Murnau, but he knows his place. He knows that the director is really the one that rules the roost. But there is a couple of times when he questions him, when he dares to question him, and he's one of the ones that kind of figures out what's going on in a lot of ways, and mostly because he demands realism. Murnau obviously demands realism. When he wants to shoot a Gothic castle, he goes to a real Gothic castle. He doesn't build it on the set. When he wants a real train, he doesn't build one. He goes and he gets a real train. So if he wants a vampire, it's not unlike him to go get a real vampire.
Sure. Sure.
And then, of course, our writer, the writer of the movie, who was this that played this part? I can't think of the actor's name right now.
Was it Aidan Gillette?
Yes, it could be. He's the one that sort of begins to piece together that he might actually be a vampire. But of course, nobody believes him. That's ridiculous.
This can't possibly happen.
There's no such thing as real vampires.
Right.
Come on. And of course, Eddie Izzard also has a great part in this movie.
Yeah. So the basically what you have, the film starts off with Murnau and Albin, who's played by Udo Kier, and Henrik, who's played by Aidan Gillette.
I think that's him. I think that's the right.
So you basically have, director, producer, writer, and they're shooting the scenes they're going to shoot on, a soundstage, basically. Scenes with Greta Schroeder.
Yes.
Who is the lead actress in the film, played by Catherine McCormack.
Yes.
And then they are like, okay, well, guess what? We're going to Czechoslovakia now because we're going to go shoot on location. And one of their main camera operator is Wolfgang Muller, played by Ronan Vibert. And they, get over there and start shooting, and Eddie Izzard is the person who plays Gustav von Wangenheim.
Yes,
who was the actor who played essentially the Jonathan Harker role in the story.
Kind of the hero of the story. Yeah.
The hero of the story. And the scene that they shoot, it's the first time that anybody has seen Max Schreck. They're like, at one point, Albin is going, what about Max Schreck? I mean, I don't know anything. What size clothes does he wear?
Yeah.
Do we need makeup for him? Do we need wigs for him?
Give me a clue,
Tell me
please.
something.
Yeah. Although Murnau's kind of set the table for everybody else. That said, though, this guy, he's got a very unusual technique. He's going to be demanding to be only called Count Orlik. He's only going to be in the, in these Logan. So he's kind of set the stage.
And we're only going to shoot him at night.
Yes, and we can only shoot him at night. Which that of course is a little problematic, because they literally could not shoot videos, or they really could not shoot film at night at this time. The film just couldn't handle the lighting, so that's a little bit. We have to take a little departure, from that. But we can only shoot him at night, and so they've set him at the stage as he's some kind of amazingly temperamental actor with this very bizarre technique. And everybody pretty much buys it, because it really doesn't seem that weird at the beginning of this.
But the first time that the crew see him is a scene with Gustav, where he's first approaching the castle, and the Count comes out to meet him, and you can see in Izzard's performance that Gustav is terrified.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the actor is terrified to be in proximity to this thing.
And again, our director here, I think, does a really good job in sort of recreating the setting of this scene.
Yes.
Because it not only feels like the scene in the movie, but it's even worse because we're seeing it's much more realistic looking.
Yes.
And of course, now we realize that this is a real vampire. I think it really helps to create such a great terror in that scene, which Eddie Izzard absolutely picks up on.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody loves to praise him for his wonderful performance in this movie.
And he's like, I was terrified.
Yeah, he was really terrified.
I don't want to be next to that gentleman. He's scared the living daylights out of me.
Yeah. I think if I had to stand too close to Willem Dafoe dressed up as Max Schreck, I would have probably been like,
yeah.
Can we just wrap this up and get it done? Because
can I have a garlic necklace while we shoot this?
While we shoot this, please.
Well, of course, you saw in the hotel where they were staying, not only is there a crucifix like in every room, but there's also these big garlands of garlic hanging on the windows and things. Because again, the people who live in this area, they know this guy, and they don't want him anywhere near their hotel to feed on them. Yep. So at one point, Murnau, I guess, actually removes the crucifixes from one room where he's shooting.
That's a great scene.
Yeah.
He's shooting the scene of Gustav in the inn when he wakes up and finds the book on the Nosferatu, and then the innkeeper's wife wanders in, and he's like, "Why is there a local in my frame?"
Yes, there's a native in
my frame.
There's a native in my frame.
Yeah.
And, of course, she's very upset. She actually ruins the shot because they've removed the crucifixes in that area. And she says, you can't do it. Don't you know?
Yeah.
You can't do that. And she's really panicked. you know, and of course, everybody thinks she's, you know, ridiculously superstitious. And of course, it turns out they're right.
Right. And at one point in the film, you begin to realize that Shrek has been feeding on Wolfgang.
Yes.
And eventually he collapses and can no longer work. So he sends away by air for a substitute cameraman.
Yes.
Which arrives in the person of Fritz Arno Wagner, who is this like young hotshot cameraman who knows he's a hotshot cameraman, played by Cary Elwes.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, he's annoying.
I think Cary Elwes plays this part very well. I think he has a kind of a great talent for sort of playing these guys who really know how talented they are, but yet they're capable, but yet they're still quite annoying as well. I think Cary always plays that part very, very well.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I know that this is an issue for Chad too. He kind of goes the Kevin Costner route with the accent.
Yeah, it was the one issue I had because I think everybody else did really, really well with their accents and their portrayals in this film, and I just had I had trouble with Cary Elwes, and I don't know if it was just the accent or what, but that one didn't seem to work for me as much as the other people in the
other thing that's at issue is that his personality is in stark contrast to everyone else on that film shoot,
other than maybe the director.
Well, I would say with the possible exception of Greta.
They both are stars and in their own particular idiom, and they know it.
Yeah. See, with Murnau, it's not a flamboyant thing; it's a quiet, intense narcissism.
It's a tortured artist kind of a thing.
With Fritz and with Greta, it's more of an extrovert.
Yeah.
You know, let everyone around you know that you're a star.
It's more of a privilege thing. They're privileged, whereas Murnau's the tortured artist here.
Oh, and by the way, I did look it up. Murnau finished an undergraduate degree in philology.
Oh, okay.
And that's it.
Oh,
that's
so
it.
then he did not have
the Herr Doctor was an honorary to cater to his ego. Apparently.
I see. That makes perfect sense.
It does, actually.
That fits. That makes more sense.
But as they go on through the shoot, Shrek begins to start laying down demands. Like, Murnau has this whole sequence on a ship that he plans to shoot on a ship, and Max says, I won't go on the boat.
Yeah.
And so Murnau ends up having to build a boat set to shoot all of Max's scenes.
Yes, of course. Remember, he's a vampire, so that he doesn't want to be surrounded by moving water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although technically, I think oceans don't count. I think it's rivers.
I guess it depends on the vampire, but something about it.
Something about it, he just didn't want to mess with it at all.
He doesn't want to mess with it. So, apparently they've made this deal. I mean, this is where we kind of see how far Murnau is going to go to get this movie that he was willing to make this deal with what he knows is in fact a real vampire.
And it goes to something that I mentioned to Buddy, and he was like, exactly, you need to say this in the episode.
Yes, please do.
Is that Max Schreck is the monster in the movie, but not the villain.
Yeah.
Murnau is the villain.
Yes, when we see the length that he goes to get his movie made.
He made the deal with Shrek that the vampire could have Greta.
Yeah.
The vampire could basically drain her and kill her.
Yeah.
So he's basically, sold a life to this creature to get his movie.
And he wants to shoot it.
Yeah.
He wants to shoot it.
It's the classic deal with the devil. Yeah.
It is.
It is.
How far would you go to be the best, to make the best movie, to be considered the best director of all time? How far are you willing to go? And we see, in this movie that Murnau is willing to Watch somebody die.
Yeah,
Let
there
somebody
seems
die.
to be no step too far for him.
No.
As long as he gets
absolutely
the
not.
result he wants.
And we see that at the end of this film.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it which I'm not going to give away.
Right.
But the end of the film is a perfect example of how far he's willing to go to get this movie and to make this movie the best.
Yeah.
And I think that's the perfect way to say it, is that the real villain of this movie is not, in fact, the vampire. It is, in fact, Murnau, because he will sacrifice anybody and anything. And yeah, he's made this deal with this vampire just to make this movie. That's the one thing that the vampire wants. Is to kill the lead actress. It's the only thing that he really wants, and he's willing to be given that. Or Murnau's willing to give that away so that he can make the best vampire movie ever. Yeah. And it's amazing. Yeah, and again, we don't want to give the ending away, but what happens at the ending really demonstrates the true evil in this movie, and it's Murnau. It is not, in fact.
And when it comes down to it, it ends up being a direct conflict between Shrek and Murnau.
Absolutely.
And Murnau wins.
Well, this is another aspect of the genius, I think, of Willem Dafoe in this movie. We see how antsy this guy is, and how we see he's already fed on the cinematographer, and he's talking
maybe
about
the script girl, as we heard in the trailer.
Yes, and he's talking about maybe some other ones. One of my favorite lines in the entire movie is, "We don't really need the writer anymore."
Yes, yes.
I love
Murnau
that
trying
line.
to say, "You could eat him.
Yeah.
I don't like him. You could eat him."
He says, "We don't really need the writer anymore, do we?" Absolutely hysterical. But we get the idea that as a vampire, Shrek is starving.
Yeah.
He's got this incredible need. He can't, and he basically can't contain himself when the scene where he's going to finally be given Greta. He can't contain himself. The closer he gets to that shot, the more he's losing control over his desires, and they're just and in some ways you pity him. As disgusting as it is, as disgusting a character it is, you almost pity him because of the fact that that this guy is using this hunger to take advantage of him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scene which I'm not going to get into in great detail because I'll talk about it later. But there's a scene where he actually has a conversation with a couple people. Shrek does, and and he basically says, I'm too old.
Yeah.
And I can't remember basic things about my early life and my origin. I'm too old to make new vampires. I'm not sure I ever could.
Yeah.
And just so you get the idea that this creature has spent so much time alone and just aging.
Yeah.
Aging slower, obviously.
Yeah.
But now the creature is to a point where the aging process is really starting to interfere with its existence.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there's one part where he quotes a very interesting passage from a Greek myth about a character that is immortal but continues to age.
Right.
And so sort of making himself like that character, which is absolutely perfect to describe this character. But we see he's not only alone, but he's starving. Yeah. He's losing control as the closer that this gets, and that's what Murnau has taken advantage of. And as disgusting as this guy is, as terrifying as he is, I think by the end of this movie, you actually feel something for him.
Yeah.
Who could pull that off other than an actor like Willem Dafoe?
Yeah.
He pulls that off brilliantly.
And the nice thing is that it's telegraphed
in
the movie, because the scene with Gustav, where Gustav accidentally cuts his thumb with the knife when he's cutting bread.
Yeah.
Shrek leaps on his thumb and starts sucking it.
Yeah.
And Gustav freaks out, and then the lights go out, and he's like, "Get him off me! Get him off me!" You know what I mean?
Yeah. You get the idea that he's this is controlling this guy, and this is what Murnau's taking advantage of.
Yeah.
Why? so that he could get the best movie.
And
that he
looking
can.
at it in terms of backstory, I'm pretty sure that the reason he's starving is because all of the villagers all over the place know the rules now and they know how to protect themselves.
He's been around for a long time. Everybody knows how to protect themselves.
And
nobody goes anywhere near him.
And nobody goes out after dark.
No.
I mean, so he can't. I mean, there's a scene where we saw it in the trailer where he's given animals in a crate.
Yeah, he's appeased by vermin essentially.
Yeah,
rats and they give him a ferret at one point. That's the only way they can appease him is to give him a vermin that nobody cares about.
Yeah,
and that's what he's been feeding on. Who knows for how long?
Yeah,
this guy, he's dying. He's like a vampire. He is. He's starving, and the desire for that is controlling him. And again, the closer he gets to that scene where he knows he's going to get the actress,
but
the more control he's losing.
I think it's also the fact that he's attracted to her.
Yeah, I think he's much more attracted to killing her than anything else.
Well, but there's a particular element to that scene that I won't get into because it'll spoil stuff. But
yeah.
I mean, there's a particular physical element to that scene
that's true,
that
yes.
there's some vestiges of
Sure.
human horniness in there.
Sure. I mean that when we talk about vampires, that's kind of where they came from originally.
Sure.
Was repressed sexuality.
Sure.
They're the uber metaphor for repressed sexuality.
Yes.
But I really think it's amazing that you actually feel some sympathy for this pathetic creature. By the end of this movie, you don't start out that way, but I think by the end of the movie, the audience's opinion toward this guy has changed, and it's because of this. It's not only because of the great script and how well it's written, but because of the amazing performance that Willem Dafoe puts in here.
Yeah.
He actually manages to extract that empathy from the audience where none was at the beginning of the movie, where none of it was. It's a brilliant performance.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to ask the same question that I asked for Boondock Saints. Is favorite scene?
Oh yeah, that's easy. It is. It's where he eats the bat, because it's at that point I would have been out of there. I'm sorry. So there's two people from the movie that are sitting and talking.
It's Albin and Henrik, the producer and the writer.
And they're talking to Max and sort of joking with him a little bit. And all of a sudden, he catches this bat out of midair, bites the head off of it, and sucks the blood out of it. And one of them chalks it up to the fact that I think he was drunk. And it's like, I'm sorry, nobody gets that drunk. And if I see that, I'm on the next boat out of town. Okay, I'm not sticking around for this. Okay, it's like, no, this guy he either A, is a real vampire, or B, has a lot of screws loose. And either way, I am not sticking around to see what happens. All right. So it was an interesting part of the film, because it was really him coming out to people on the movie saying, I am a vampire. This is as close to me just telling you, yes, I am a vampire. And they still don't believe it, and I found it very interesting, and so that is my favorite scene in the movie.
Well, this is going to be interesting because that's mine too, but for a different reason. For me, Buddy just pointed out that by the end of the film, you've actually developed some sympathy for Max Schreck. This is the scene where that sympathy emerges.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because this is the scene where he reveals to Albin and Henrik the fact that he is so old, he's lost who he was. He can no longer remember how he became a vampire. He remembers there was a woman involved.
Yeah.
And that she spent the night and left, and then he was a vampire. But that's it.
Apparently, there was in fact a scene that they had shot that described where he came from. And then a woman sired him apparently, but it got cut out, and it doesn't exist in the film.
And so you have this character who is utterly alien. Yeah. In terms of comparing it to the humans in the crew, but in that moment, you feel empathy for him. You feel sympathy for him because you realize that this is a creature who's existed so long, he no longer remembers who he was. He only knows who he is now.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, and especially, you know, for me, you know, my dad died from complications from Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit kind of like that. It's
it is.
Alzheimer's, you exist in the now and you really don't remember the then.
No.
And so, you know, I obviously would be predisposed to feel sympathy for that, but I think it works really well in terms of the story.
Oh, yeah.
Because this creature all of a sudden stops being scary for a minute and just is kind of sad.
Oh, yeah. I think what really drives it home is when the producer and the writer ask him about, well, here's a chance to talk to a real vampire, a real vampire, about Dracula, about the novel Dracula. Said,
yes.
Tell us about how you felt about it. He says, I thought it was sad.
Yes.
He said, sad? What are you talking about? He says, well, the beginning scene when in Dracula, when
in Nosferatu.
well, he's talking about the book Dracula.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Where Harker comes to the castle, this is for the first time. He has no servants. Dracula has no servants because, of course, he's lived alone for 400 years or something like that. He's got no servants. He says, and now all of a sudden he has to entertain this guy and he has to give him a meal. Well, he hasn't eaten real food in hundreds of years. How does he remember? How to buy bread?
Yes. Does he remember how to buy cheese?
How to choose the right wine?
Yeah.
Where to even get, how to cook the food? Does he even remember how to do all of these things? And then there's everything else he's got to prepare, for this guy. And there's all of these things that he hasn't done. He says, and he's all by himself, and that reminds him of all of his former glory. When he starts thinking back to the time when he actually ate food, and that makes him think back to the time that he was a count. He was a real count, and he was a general, and he had soldiers and
attendants
and servants, and a full castle. And it reminds him of that former glory that he no longer has and hasn't had for hundreds of years. It's like, oh my God, I'm sympathizing with Dracula.
Yeah, and because you've never thought about it from that point of view.
No, never thought about Dracula from that point of view. It's not written from that point of view. But of course, this guy in the same position, that's who he sympathizes with, and he drags you down that alleyway exactly with him, and you feel sympathy for Dracula, and you feel even more sympathy for Max Schreck in this movie. It's freaking brilliant.
Yeah,
it's absolutely brilliant.
And that's where you got to give a tip of the hat to Stephen Katz.
The screenplay is really, really well done. And yeah, that scene in particular, it's a great performance as well. But yeah, with that, talk about a great scene. And just thinking about how a real vampire would read the novel Dracula and put himself in the place of the vampire, and that's his identification character, and to see it from that point of view, that's a mind blower.
Yeah,
and you're right. It absolutely makes you. Gives you empathy for both of those characters who you're not supposed to have empathy for.
No, because they're the monsters.
They're the monsters. They're the evil. They're disease.
They're the other.
Yeah, they're disease. They're decay.
Yeah.
They're death.
Yeah.
That's Nosferatu. The vampire basically is death, essentially. But that's not how we're feeling.
No.
By starting in this scene, it starts that wandering down that by the end of the movie, that's where we are. It's like, oh my God, talk about feeling something for the monster. We're really not that different. The guy that we really feel is the evil dude is, of course, Murnau.
Yeah.
When we see, him practically...
The lengths that he's willing to go to get his movie.
Practically cackling and twirling his mustache while all of these bad things happen.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there happily cranking the camera and getting it all on film. That's much more evil, and that's, much scarier than a real vampire. You know? It's so well done. Yeah, absolutely. The screenplay is fantastic.
All right, so favorite scene for you?
I love that scene as well, and your guys are well to pick it. There's one scene in particular where where Shrek is kind of you can see that the hunger has started getting to him. He's already fed on the one cinematographer enough to put him out of the game.
Yeah.
And that they have to get another one, and they've sort of he's trying to negotiate, trying to get another one off the crew. And he says, "No, you cannot have." And Murnau, what's interesting about Murnau up until this point, in the face of the vampire, is still just as demanding as anybody else. He doesn't treat this guy as a amazingly powerful supernatural being. He treats him like he's a servant.
Like he's another actor.
He's another actor. Yeah, he's a set piece that eats.
Yeah,
I think is pretty much what he thinks. And he yells at him, and he scolds him. He tells him what's what, and this is the way it's going to be, and this is my movie, and you are screwing up my movie. That kind of a thing. And when he actually demands, I'm not going on the boat. I'm not going to go on the boat, so that they have to build the set of the boat on the castle, on the set of the castle, so that they can shoot the scenes with him. And now, very well, I will shoot around you, but you were making this very difficult. And at one point, he actually gets so upset with Shrek that he gets into his face. And he actually kind of, pulls a very strong power move that he must have pulled 1,000 times with every temperamental actor and actress that and every producer that he's ever worked with. He's probably pulled this 100 times, and it's worked virtually every other time. And he pulls this on Shrek, who, for a second there, it looks like it's actually going to work. Or this guy is actually staring down and scolding the vampire. But just for a second, Shrek just looks at him. And you see his eyes widen, and suddenly both the postures of both actors starts changing slowly. Murnau starts leaning backwards, and Shrek begins leaning forward. So much so that eventually the power structure in this scene is completely changed.
Yeah.
And not a word is spoken by Shrek. He just stares at him with the same kind of thing that we saw the actual Max Shrek do.
Well, he stares at him and he grins at him.
Yeah, the same kind of thing that we saw Shrek do in the original film, which is why that sort of aura of power that he gives so often. We suddenly see that in this film, and now you sort of get the idea. You're screwing with the wrong guy, Murnau.
Yeah, you may have just crossed a line.
Yeah. I realize that you may not even be taking this. You know this guy's a real vampire. Maybe you don't realize how powerful he really is. And I think he kind of forgot about it when he's screaming at him at this point. And here is Shrek
he's
reminding
dealing with him like any other actor.
And here is Shrek reminding him, hey, I'm more than 400 years old, and I can kill you in a second, and no one will ever miss you.
Right.
And he just but doesn't say anything. He
that scene plays out with no dialogue.
Yes, he just stares at it. And I love how the posture of both actors changes, and eventually Murnau just sort of backs away and leaves the room.
Yep.
And you know who won that particular standoff. Love that scene. It really shows who the powerful one is. Murnau thinks it's him, but he learns a quick lesson that it is not, in fact.
Yeah.
He is not, in fact, the power seat in this movie.
Nope.
And I love how both actors treat that, and I think it comes off really, really well. I love that scene in the movie. It's probably my favorite one.
Yeah, that's a very powerful moment.
It's such a great movie, and it's Shrek saying, "Don't screw with me. I can kill you without even thinking about it."
Yeah. Probably my second favorite scene in the film. It's done very well, and you can see Murnau. Again, he's in charge, or at least he likes to think he's in charge, because he's always in charge, even when he makes this deal with the vampire. He still thinks he's in charge, but for that second, he's not.
That's right. He learns who the real powerhouse is, and and I think that's amazing. Just to think what Shrek could do to him if he really, really wanted to.
All right, here we go. By your own scale, where do you rate Shadow of the Vampire?
Yeah, this is an A film. This movie is excellent. 96, 97%. It's a very high A. You can't get much better than the scenes where Malkovich and Dafoe are working off of one another. These are two very talented actors doing what they absolutely do best. And you have great actors portraying around them in this film.
Supporting actors, yeah.
Yeah, supporting actors. Like I said, the one, maybe Carrie Elways, didn't work for me. But that wasn't enough to near bring down this film.
Well, now
the script,
his performance wasn't bad. It was just his accent that was bad.
And the performance was all right for me. It didn't do a lot for me.
Okay.
Accent or whatever, it just didn't do a lot for me. But he's still, not enough to bring this film down. Like you said, the script is fantastic. I think the cinematography in this movie is done very, very well.
It really is. And how they actually introduce clips from the original film.
Yep.
To the point where if you didn't know which ones were original and which ones were reshot, you wouldn't know the difference by looking at them.
Absolutely.
And even the ones that are redone are done so well. You really could have easily pulled those shots out of the original film. They're done so well and so similar to the original film, using modern technology, kind of dumbing everything down. It's great, and it's very difficult to look at that and go, oh, that couldn't possibly be a silent film. It really looks like that stock of film, and the stutter, the sort of the stutter frame, and the lighting and everything else. It's so well done. And kudos to the cinematographer.
Yeah, and they did a lot of the old school things to make it sort of look at like a 1920s feel. They use the interstitial cards and stuff like that. Which
in the actual movie, they use the cards. Yeah, there's the 3 or 4 times when we see that,
which I thought was really good. There was a lot of great things about this film. I can see why it got some top marks and some Oscar nominations, because it is very, very well, not the least of which is Willem Dafoe, going all out with the makeup and taking over the role of Max Schreck in this film and doing an absolute fantastic job. So yeah, this is a high A. I would, if I were you and you like film in general, but you like sort of these different looks at history and sort of these alternative history kind of movies, take a look at this one. I think you're really going to enjoy it.
Yeah. For me, this is a 10 out of 10. I've loved this movie since the first time I saw it. I remember watching Nosferatu when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Seeing it projected on the side of a really, really, really big, UPS style truck that was a bookmobile for the Ann Arbor Public Library that used to go out to sort of the outer edges and bring stuff. And in the summers, they would show movies on the side of the vehicle, and that's where I saw this for the first time, saw Nosferatu, and I've loved this movie ever since. And, so I learned about it and learned about the urban legend, and then this movie came out, and I was like, oh, here we go, urban legend coming to life on the screen. This is awesome. And like Chad said, it's just done so very well. I mean, everything about this movie was put together in what I would consider to be the best way possible. I love the fact that they actually used the ideas of filmmaking from the 20s, and when they would go, they would show you what it looked like from Murnau's perspective, because he would say, okay, iris out, and as the iris moved out, the film would fade to black and white. And then you would see it as it would eventually be seen by audiences. And, but there were other times when they'd be shooting something and it's in black and white, and then he would say iris in, and they would iris in, and it would bleed back into color. I mean, they were really clever about how they used that juxtaposition between black and white and color to show sort of where they were with the making of the film and that particular scene and the performances are awesome. I mean, Dafoe is stunningly good. Malkovich is stunningly good.
Oh, yeah.
Udo Kier is at his Udo Kierist.
He's so great. I really like Udo Kier.
Yeah. And, I mean,
Well, Eddie is. I think Eddie.
Oh God,
Izzard,
yes, and Eddie Izzard.
His performance
is
wonderful in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, and he's, and the interesting thing is that we lose track of him about 20 minutes before the end of the movie because his scenes are done.
Yeah, his scenes are done.
And so they go, back to shooting the scenes with Greta to finish off the film, and and it's interesting because he just kind of isn't there anymore. And it almost feels like there should have been something of it. Well, I'm going back. Goodbye, kind of thing. But yeah, this is a great movie, and it does justice to that urban legend. So
sure, yeah, absolutely.
This 10 out of 10 for me. I love this movie.
Yeah, this is a really good movie. I like virtually everything about this movie. I mean, even from the opening credits, where sort of the opening credits are sort of done in the same kind of German expressionist style that would not be entirely misplaced in an actual German expressionist silent film from the early 20s.
Yep.
I really like this movie. I like how it sort of takes this urban legend and sort of adds some reality to it, and what would have happened if this were if there were actually some some reality to this, and I think it's done in an amazingly clever way that really makes you think about things, and again, wonderful script, great directing, and of course fantastic performances all around. I love the juxtapositions between the actual film that we're supposed to be watching in Nosferatu, and then sort of the behind the scenes stuff, and of course the idea of all the shadows and things like that, which of course the name of the movie is Shadow of the Vampire.
Right.
That takes on a very interesting connotation in this movie. And again, I can't say too much about without ruining the end of the movie, but it takes on sort of an interesting connotation in this movie.
Absolutely.
And, I love how that sort of all plays out. And I mean, the acting in this movie is just top notch. So this is a very high recommendation for me. So for me, I have to give Shadow of the Vampire 5 rapidly consumed bats out of 5. Very rapid.
Yeah. Well, he was hungry.
Yes,
that was very clear.
Yes, he was.
All right. Well, for our next pairing, we're going to move from focusing on an actor to focusing on a director. And we're going to look at 2 films by Paul Verhoeven. Yeah. We're going to look at 1987.
Not Stephen Summers?
No.
I didn't think so, but I thought I'd ask.
Never. We're going to look at 1987's RoboCop and the film that came out a decade later in 97, Starship Troopers.
Yes, 2 very interesting films.
Those will be our next couple episodes. So until then, I'm Jeff.
I'm Buddy.
I'm Chad.
Watch more movies. If you have movies you'd like us to review on this podcast, favorites, or just movies that stand out to you for one reason or another, let us know. Visit 2geeksandaget.com to connect with us on social media or send us an email. We'd love to have you leave us a review on iTunes as well, and you can do that by visiting review.2geeksandaget.com. Our theme music is called Guernica, and it's performed by Blanket Music. 2 Geeks and a Git is a production of SOR Radio Studios at sorradio.org. This program is registered under the Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives Non-Commercial Copyright 2021.